I present to you the Writers Cafe. It is the aim of the Indian Creek Writers Cafe to create an atmosphere where wonderful writing can occur. We want to become creative, efficient, and imaginative writers who can read and write at the highest level. This session is in preparation for the Georgia Milestones test, which all 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders will take in the spring of 2021. This is specifically for ELA sections 2 and 3, where students will be expected to complete constructed response items. This slide shows the test design for 3rd grade up here in the top right, 4th grade here on the left side, and 5th grade down in the bottom right side. You will notice that all grade levels have the same balance in terms of the questions that they will be asked. You will have 37 selected response items, which are multiple choice, and they will be worth 37 points. There will be 5 technology enhanced items, which is essentially 2 select response items. The first one is asking for an answer, and the second selected response is asking for the reason why you selected that answer, and those are worth 10 points total. This is what we are focusing on in today's session, the 2-point constructed response items and the 4-point extended constructed response items. On your test, you can expect to have one of each. You will have 1 constructed response item worth 2 points and 1 extended constructed response item worth 4 points. And that 4-point question is typically a narrative response. As you are writing, the test will typically have some sort of rubric that will look very similar to these. Maybe not exactly like this, but regardless of what you are writing, you will have a rubric or a checklist that describes, if you're doing narrative writing, it will look something like this, where it talks you to develop a real or imagined experience. And we all know that narrative writings are usually fictional or non-fictional stories. This is what this image at the bottom shows here. If you are asked to write an opinion piece, you are talking about what do you think about something. So that is the kind of writing you might have, and this is a checklist that would go along with opinion writing. Your teachers should share checklists and rubrics with you throughout your classes, of course. So the informational or explanatory writing is when you write about information. Typically, it might have something to do with science or social studies or something of that nature. So these are the items you would have to do to write an informational or explanatory piece very well. On this slide, this is an example of what a 2-point sample constructed response might look like. All right, so here in the top box it says, what is the theme of the story? So chances are you learned in your class from your teachers about themes, and it says to use details from the story to support your answer. This is always very important because most questions will ask you to use details from the story or the passage or what you have read to support your answer. And then you will write your answer on the lines or on the answer document. For our milestones test, you will probably have to type on the computer. So hopefully you are having lots of practice doing that with your teachers this year. And of course, with us being virtual. So I'm not going to go through the rubric here, the scoring rubric, but they do have scores for getting 2 points, 1 point, or 0 points. And just know that to get 0 points just means that you give no evidence of the ability to determine the theme or to explain the support for the theme. So this would be an example of a 0-point response by a student. And over here would be an example of a 2-point response for this type of question. Here's another example of a 2-point sample constructed response item. Here it says explain a lesson that is shared by both passages. Use details from both passages to support your answer. So sometimes they may have 2 passages for you to read, and you are to answer using details from both passages. Again, it is very important for our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders to use what you have read to support your answers. So again, here is a rubric for how you can get 2 points on that question, 1 point, or 0 points. And again, 0 points means that you give no evidence of the ability to integrate information from 2 texts on the same topic. Oftentimes you get 0 points if you just copy, what is on the test. You just copy the words. So here's an example of a 0-point response, and here's an example of a 2-point response. And again, your teachers do have this presentation, so they might be able to go over those more with you. Now we are going to look at a 4-point extended constructed response. So these typically would have a little more expectation in terms of what you are to write with it and so on. But these kinds of responses, that you can see on the left side here on the bottom, it says they may be either a literary text that you read, it could be an informational text or passage that you read, or it could be paired passages, similar to that last question I showed you, using 2 literary, 2 informational, or 1 literary and 1 informational. Usually you will not have any informational text reading here. It's going to be literary or informational or both combined. So an example of this is up here at the top. You can see it says, write a conclusion to the story that starts with Charlie asking Kate, how did you keep the secret? So for this task, the students were probably expected to read a story about these 2 characters, Charlie and Kate. So this response is asking the students to create a new ending or write a conclusion to the story, okay? So use details from the story. There that is again, using details from the story to help describe what happens. Use descriptive words and phrases to make your writing more interesting. So important, boys and girls, that you are using descriptive words and phrases. And in fact, when I look at the narrative writer's checklist, if I look here, after you're supposed to develop a real or imagined experience, you're also supposed to use transitional words and phrases to sequence the events. You're supposed to use dialogue, where you have characters talking to each other. Develop the event, show how characters respond to situations. Do things like sensory details. What did they see, taste, touch, smell? Those sorts of things. And include a conclusion. Even though this response is writing a conclusion, usually if you are writing a narrative story or writing, then you will have a conclusion in that. So, and then of course using ideas from the passages. So this is a 4-point, this is the continuation of that, and the trait examines the writer's ability to effectively develop real or imagined experiences, okay? So this is what you were supposed to do. The student's response, well-developed narrative, and this is an example of a 4-point response when somebody said, just like that, asked them to do, to describe or write a new conclusion to the story with Charlie and Kate. So you can see they're talking about Charlie and Kate. I can already see by the quotation marks they have dialogue. That means they have them talking to each other. Charlie looked at Kate with surprise. That's a good detailed sentence right there. Of course, Kate said. All right, so I'm just looking at parts of this response, and so we have the characters talking to each other. They have descriptive language, so that would earn a student 4 points. On the next page, we can see some lower level responses. Again, they started like the prompt had asked them to. They started with Charlie asking Kate, how did you keep the secret? But then there's just a few little details. It's not really detailed enough to earn more than 1 point. So this is just a very low level response. And then you would earn 0 points, of course, like I said, if you have a blank response, you don't type anything. You copied, all you did was copied the question or something like that, or you copied straight from the passage. It's too limited. It's you're typing in a language other than English. Those sorts of things can earn you 0 points on your response. So for the Writer's Cafe, we actually have 3 different parts. All right. One part is where we do some narrative writing in response in a narrative way. The second part will be informational, and the third part will be opinion writing. So part 1, which we are doing today, is called Nicely Narrative. And this, of course, is when we are going to do a narrative response to our assignment today. So in just a little bit, your teachers are going to let you write. So it is your turn to write, whether you're 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade. And the following, so for our 3rd grade, they are going to read a passage called Dog Business, and they are going to be asked to do a narrative response to the passage called Dog Business. Again, your teacher will tell you or share the passage with you, and they'll tell you what they expect you to write. If your teacher wants you to write in teams or with a partner, that is fine. If your teacher wants you to write individually, that is fine as well. But third graders will be writing about a narrative passage called Dog Business. Fourth graders will be writing about a passage called He Played Guitar. Again, another narrative response. Since this is nicely narrative, we are having our fourth graders to write about He Played Guitar. And our fifth grade students will be writing about a story called Family of Potters. So our fifth graders will be writing a narrative response to Family of Potters. All right. And for some of your responses, there may be two different things that your teachers have you to write. For some people, it might just be one, but you will have the responses to those stories, third, fourth, and fifth graders. And they are appropriately leveled for your grade level. So the next time I present a section to you or for the Writers Cafe, we will be talking about ELA Section 1. So we started with Sections 2 and 3, but we will be going back to Section 1 because it's a little bit more detailed writing. So we're going to get a little more in-depth into what a larger responded or response looks like, and it's called the extended writing response. So next time we meet, we will talk about ELA Section 1. Thank you, and have a great day.